Thanks for coming out to Taste of IT and our talk here at DataYard, Network Innovation in a Post-Copper World. Really excited to be sharing some of the really cool things we're doing here at DataYard with regards to network innovation. We'll be specifically talking about WAN technologies for today. Plenty of cool LAN stuff going on too, but WAN's the hot topic. We're always needing more and more bandwidth. Let me start off by what's working? There we go. Let me introduce myself to get started. My role here at DataYard, I'm a technical engineering lead. Been at DataYard about 11 months now, and loving every minute of it. Doing a lot of really great things. I have a really great team at DataYard. I work on the AYS division, or At Your Services. That's our consulting and managed services arm. Our team at DataYard has been doing a lot of awesome things with network innovation for a long time now, 23 years this year. Our vision as a company is to make technology human, to take the awesome things that people like all of us do every day in terms of internet technologies and systems, applying them to real world use cases to meet business needs. Our whole vision for Dayton, I always imagine that there's, the next Wright brothers out there somewhere, and they can't upload their CAD files to their next vendor or their partner because their internet's too slow. When Dayton got started, the internet revolution was just getting started in 1995. Internet speeds at that time were around 50 gigabits per hour. Now they're around 56 terabytes per second. Internet speeds have just grown and grown as the years have gone. And a lot of that has to do with more use cases, more applications, businesses using more and more data, but also has to do with more and more things moving to the cloud and the need for speed. But before I get talking about the cloud and that transition and the considerations you need to take into account when moving things to the cloud, specifically regards to your WAN technologies, I wanted to give a few guidelines on this talk. Not a sales pitch. No sales pitch is just great information. I don't want to tell you about any specific vendors or any specific implementations. Everybody in this room is already doing a lot of great things with their partners and customers. What I want to give you today is the information that you can use, whether you're an internet service provider like DataYard or whether you're working with internet service providers to be a solutions implementer for your customers or a VAR, or whether you're doing your own private man. Could be different buildings on the same campus or different sites within an organization. All of these technologies are applicable to you, and be happy to talk about specific vendors, specific implementations outside of this. So if you want to get into the nitty-gritty on any of those details, feel free to get connected afterwards and we'll talk about that. When it comes to the need for speed, 1 gigabit per second has been the gold standard on LAN technology for a long time, over 10 years. Everybody got really used to that when gigabit was the standard early 2000s in LAN. Things felt great. Then everything started moving to the cloud, and unfortunately a lot of people moved things to the cloud without really accounting for how much slower their WAN speeds are. Not just 100 megabits per second, it was often much worse than that, and then people realized, oh, the user experience is terrible now. So as that transition has taken place, the need for gigabit per second WAN connectivity has increased and increased. But unfortunately, sometimes our WAN technologies have not kept pace with that need. And so today I wanted to talk to you about a few techniques and systems that can be used to achieve gigabit per second WAN speeds so that that transition to the cloud is less painful and provides for a better user experience. Like I was saying, the need for faster WAN is with us all the time. We need higher throughput. We need to push more data per second all the time. We also need lower latency. The time that it takes for a packet of data to arrive at its destination needs to be less because we're doing things in real time, like voice communication, video communication, stock trading, things that are super sensitive to latency. We also need less jitter. We need the packets to arrive roughly in the order that we sent them because of applications like voice and video, so that things aren't jumbled up, or else you get bad call quality, bad user experience. We need to ensure that the packets arrive on time, and we need to make sure that the circuit stays up. One hour internet outage for a cloud-connected business can be crippling. You have a workforce of people who now suddenly can't do their job until the internet connectivity is restored. We also need smarter, more efficient use of bandwidth. It's a scarce resource, bandwidth, and you don't want to be wasting all of it on Netflix or even Windows updates, which could maybe wait until after hours and not taking down the whole business. And of course, we're always wanting to lower and reduce costs where we can. So let's talk about a few ways that we can do that. The first way that everybody's very familiar with is fiber. That's been the most obvious choice for replacing old copper circuits. Fiber is a way that you can transfer a lot of data really fast with low latency, but unfortunately a lot of times it's very expensive. Building dedicated circuits for fiber is extremely expensive. It involves huge construction costs, big initial capital expenditures. Oftentimes there's expensive and tedious licensing and permitting processes for that construction. And so you can reduce costs a lot by sharing fiber circuits. You reduce the average cost for a bunch of customers by putting them on the same loop of fiber. One way that you can achieve that is direct fiber circuits for that loop with active switching at each step of the way, but that has a lot of pitfalls. So we'll talk about that. A better way is using something called wave division multiplexing, where you're sending multiple signals over the same fiber loop with different frequencies for each customer. Using techniques like this, you can deliver 1 gigabit per second to many different endpoints, whether that's fiber to the building or fiber to the suite. Thinking about fiber to the suite, there's a big industry shift happening for property managers and tenant spaces, where if you want to be at the cutting edge of a tech-focused business in today's world, being able to offer 1 gigabit per second low latency fiber internet service to all your tenants is a big game changer and really sets you apart from the competition. And so when I was talking about generalized use cases, this is a great thing to think about for even just a single building itself, where if you have multiple tenants in a space, you can implement something like a small area of passive optic network to really set yourself apart. Direct fiber is really expensive, like I was saying. If you were to build direct fiber to customer 1, customer 2, or customer N, you're going to be paying that full capital expenditure cost for each circuit. And like I was saying before, this could be an internet service provider with their optical line transmitting unit and optical network transmitting unit for multiple customers, or this could be, a headquarters on the left and different suites or different buildings on a campus. Whatever the case may be, building a single fiber circuit to all of those is very expensive. So an obvious solution is, well, maybe we'll just go to customer 1, customer 2, customer 3, so on down the line. But when you do it like this, where you have a active switching, where you're converting the fiber to copper for each of those customers or tenant spaces, each hop down the line, you run into a lot of single points of failure. If power goes out at one of those buildings or suites, every customer or building or suite down the line is affected. They're all going to be out of service. If you need to service one of those units, firmware updates, maintenance, everybody else is down as well. So it's really risky, and then what you end up with is a hesitancy to ever update firmware or maintenance equipment, and infrastructure gets old fast. Instead of doing that, you can use a passive optical network via frequency division multiplexing, where you're sending different frequencies on the same circuit and splitting them off with a passive optical splitter. It's essentially a prism that can take the light and break out the different frequencies using mirrors and send it to each customer so that each customer has their own unique frequency, getting a gigabit per that customer without the need for any single points of failure. When you do it like that, you lose power at one of the customers, they're down, and they need to get back up as quick as possible. But all the other customers along that circuit continue to operate and run at the same speed that they were before. They're not even aware that there's an outage somewhere else on the fiber loop. You can even extend this concept, like they were talking about the smart cities talk earlier today for full city fiber loops, where you can have this same frequency division multiplexing, but you're adding frequencies at each step along the line and making a full loop where you can even survive a single fiber cut within a loop. You can't survive two, but at least one, so that you can keep the rest of the customers up. Another great option is fixed wireless internet. It's a great option, especially when fiber isn't available in a given area, or it's cost prohibitive, or city permitting won't allow fiber build-outs in that area. Fixed wireless is something that has really taken the WAN world by storm. We're seeing the emergence of a lot of great WISPs, or wireless internet service providers. It's great also for inter-campus connectivity, like we were talking about before, where your headquarters site needs to get connected to multiple buildings, but maybe building fiber between every building is expensive. You can do it in a point-to-point or point-to-multi-point fashion. You can connect two buildings directly, or connect one building to multiples with just a single radio at the headquarters end. Point-to-multi-point deployments like ponds are great for reducing average costs. They do require a time division multiple access system. Before, you were doing frequency division multiplexing. Multiple frequencies over the same fiber circuit. With point-to-multipoint fixed wireless, you need to be able to have all the wireless radios utilize that shared medium in such a way that they don't interfere with each other. In old school Wi-Fi, we use something called carrier sense multiple access collision avoidance. Essentially what that is just all the devices within a local area network that are on Wi-Fi, they can all sense each other when each other's talking, and they wait their turn. It's just like when you're at a dinner table and you don't want to talk over somebody, you wait till they're speaking and you can hear that they're all talking. But imagine if I'm in a room right here and somebody's down that hallway and somebody's down that hallway, and they both want to talk to me at the same time. They don't know about the other two people because they can't see each other or hear each other. And so you need smarter systems where I can say, okay, this person on this hallway and this person on this hallway, we're going to take time slots where we take turns talking to each other so that we don't end up with unexpected interference, which can take the packets and drop them essentially. There's a number of unlicensed bands in the USA that are reserved for generalized use cases, including wireless internet service providing. And there's multiple ones to choose from, but there's a trade-off between speed versus distance. If you have higher frequency, you're going to get more bandwidth, but the trade-off is you're going to be able to only send it over shorter distances, and it's going to be more sensitive to obstructions to the point where even something as small as rain can affect the quality of the signal. A 60 gigahertz band at the top left will give you very fast throughput. You can do a gig up to 2 gigs, but reliably only over short distances, 100 meters or less. Could be a great option for 2 buildings that are nearby, but if you start going over 100 meters, the degradation, especially during periods of rainfall, is just too great to be reliable. And then on down the line, there's those other choices up to the point where you get down to 900 megahertz on the far right, and you're not transmitting very much bandwidth at that point, 100 megabits per second, but it's capable of very long distances and also very tolerant of obstructions, including trees and even buildings. And it's applicable for non-line of sight deployments, to where if you don't have a clear shot to the place you want to deliver internet service, you can utilize something like the 9 megahertz band. You're going to have a trade-off in that it's going to be less throughput, but it's sometimes the best scenario depending on the environment, the landscape. 2.4 gigahertz is also a great option because you can get pretty good throughput, but there's a lot of congestion in that space in urban environments like Dayton because almost all Wi-Fi systems are on that. 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi is also becoming more and more congested as time goes on, but it's much better than 2.4 gigahertz. And 24 gigahertz is actually very free space right now. There's very little congestion in that band. What's really possible with wireless? Sounds great to call it something like wireless fiber, but is it really like fiber? Well, it depends a lot on the implementation. High-end systems can do up to 2 gigabits per second and 100 kilometers of distance. Long distances, a lot of throughput, but those are very expensive systems and require perfect line of sight on tall buildings or tall masts where roof rights or building rights can be very expensive per month. But then conversely, low-end systems can do 100 megabits per second, 10 kilometers distance with decent line of sight or even through windows or thin walls. But there's everything in between. And the right solution for the situation is really situation dependent. Placement, platform, and design are really key to success. And there's so many different bands and antennas and different technologies and designs to choose from. You really need somebody who understands those technologies and can do a survey and scope out exactly what's the best fit for what you're trying to achieve. And of course, security is always important. The question comes up all the time when you're doing wireless, can people just eavesdrop on my connection? And the answer is no, not if you implement the proper security measures. WPA2, AES, PSK, which you may be familiar with from Wi-Fi. Same technology applies here. You can use that to secure a point-to-point link. If you're doing point-to-multi-point, you can implement radius security so that each point along the way has their own unique username and password, and all the traffic's encrypted along the way. So now, yes, people can eavesdrop, but nobody's able to understand any of the traffic that's going across. Like I was saying before, surveys are your friend. You really want to vet out exactly the solution that you want to implement before you go to rely on it. Here you can see some of the DataYard survey equipment that we use to test links. We're up on some rooftops there with my Director of Infrastructure, Eric Wright. He's got his Rookie of the Year sunglasses on, looking across. And we're doing 450 megabits per second across 2 buildings through glass. Just kind of hand pointing. We weren't even really honing it in. Once you mount them properly and account for your Fresnel zones and all that, you can do much more than 450 megabits per second. Another technology that really has been a game changer in the WAN world is software-defined WAN. With software-defined WAN, you can be internet service provider agnostic, but medium aware. You can mix and match internet service providers, whatever site you might be at, depending on market changes and commodity bandwidth market conditions, without having to be locked into long-term contracts necessarily or having to be tied into a single vendor. You can often replace or sometimes augment high-cost MPLS or multi-protocol label switching networks and your VLL virtual lease line or pseudo-wire point-to-point links for multiple sites with lower-cost general-purpose bandwidth or broadband internet access. The reason I say augment is because there is still a place for MPLS. One of the misnomers of software-defined WAN that you'll hear a lot is that it's an MPLS killer or a replacement for MPLS. But we're seeing MPLS networks utilization grow at the same time software-defined WAN technologies are growing. Just like so many new technologies, they don't always replace the old technologies. Oftentimes they live side by side for different use cases and can even complement and add to one another. But in other use cases, maybe you don't need a MPLS circuit at all, and we'll talk about some of those use cases here in a moment. Through software-defined WAN solutions, you can achieve inter-site connectivity over those commodity broadband circuits that I was talking about before using active discovery, automatic discovery VPNs, where the different sites find each other automatically and build up negotiated VPN tunnels dynamically. You can also achieve high uptime with smart failover, where you have multiple internet WAN connections on a single software-defined WAN appliance, and it can auto-sense when there's problems with one or the other, not just if a link went down, but can I get to Google on this circuit? And we'll talk about some of those use cases here in a moment. So like we were talking before about MPLS, which has been the gold standard for inter-site connectivity for a long time, it was expensive, but it's effective. Essentially what you're doing with a multi-protocol label switching network is you're having some other service provider build all the tunnels that you need for you, and you just get an Ethernet handoff and connect your different sites. What they're doing behind the scenes for you is they're building a label switching network where there's fixed paths between all the different sites, and there's a lot of cost and time involved with setting something like that up, and that's why MPLS has been so expensive. But it was a great solution for its day and still is in many use cases. But what happens if you want to add another site to your enterprise? You add site 4, and maybe that provider that was providing your MPLS circuit isn't available in your area. It's just too cost prohibitive to get them involved, and so now you're looking at some other internet service provider for maybe a point-to-point virtual lease line or pseudo wire. It's a little bit less expensive than an MPLS circuit there, but now things have complicated a little bit, where before you had a very simple topology, now you got different things to account for. What happens if you want to add another site where neither MPLS at provider A nor virtual lease lines at provider B are available at that 5th site? Well, now you're getting commodity broadband circuits and spinning up your own VPN tunnel, and now the simple topology that you had has got really chaotic, really complex, a lot of things to account for, and you also realize, hey, this broadband circuit has been, for at least my use case, performing just as good as what that MPLS circuit is for all those other sites. Yet I'm spending a ton extra on that MPLS circuit. Maybe there's a better way, and oftentimes there is with software-defined WAN. You can replace all those vendor-specific, very expensive MPLS and virtual lease line circuits with commodity broadband that's available at whatever site is around, and add and remove those connections as needed. All the sites, through a zero-touch deployment and software-defined WAN controller, can find each other dynamically and build a full mesh or star topology VPN according to your needs, and have full connectivity over the internet to everyone within that organization at a much lower cost. Another effective use case for software-defined WAN is more efficient use of bandwidth. So maybe you're not dealing with multiple sites, you just have one site, but you want to be smarter about how you use your bandwidth. Software-defined WAN technologies can use application-aware throttling, scheduling, and routing decisions beyond what basic TCP, IP packet source and destination protocols were capable of in the past. You can build complex workflows for how you want to prioritize your packets, something like what this workflow here shows, to where you're doing content-aware prioritization at the top. You're taking every single packet, not just looking at, okay, here's a source and destination IP, but what's inside the payload? What are they wanting to achieve? Is it voice? Is it Google? Is it Netflix? Or maybe it's even malware. There's a lot of that going on people's networks that, yes, your security team and your security appliances should be taken care of and taking actions on. But in the meantime, as far as WAN technologies go, you're wasting bandwidth on stuff like that all the time. Aside from the security concerns and the good neighbor concerns, you're probably, you have more of that traffic on your network than you might imagine if you're not today doing content-aware inspection. So if you get any malware or botnets, spam, DDoS traffic on your circuits, just drop that traffic. No need to send it down the line and waste bandwidth. And then, maybe you also alert your security team and send them the logs of what's going on. But on the left, let's say it's voice over IP, or your executive users, or your IPsec VPN tunnels that you have to those other sites that we looked at before. That traffic is high priority, so we're going to label it high priority. And it's going to get bumped to the front of the line when there's congestion on a WAN circuit. So if it's high priority, we probably want to send it out our fiber connection if we have one. rather than sending over the broadband cable solution. But before we do, let's do a quick health check. If the fiber circuit's down, there's no reason to send it over the fiber and just have the packet drop. Send it over the cable first. But let's say you do send it over fiber and the executive team is just using all the bandwidth available. Rather than having to drop the packets, you can be smart about it. Spill over the leftover to any available bandwidth that you have on the cable connection. Alternatively, if it's just Windows updates or backups or Netflix, you can set that priority to low and send it out over the cable connection. Additionally, if it's during the day, not only do you want to set it to low, but maybe you even want to set a hard bandwidth limit so that updates and backups can't max out your internet connection and take down your entire business. But then you can do the same in the reverse direction, to where if the cable's down and the fiber's up and has available bandwidth, make use of it while you have it. And so you can see how with a workflow set up like this, the software-defined WAN appliance is taking care of the analysis needed to give you the most efficient use of your WAN bandwidth available. With these health checks, you can be a lot smarter than just seeing if a circuit is down or up. You can do continual ping checks at a certain threshold and be looking for things like, is jitter too high, or latency, or am I losing too much packet loss? And you can be specific on these health checks for specific applications. A voice over IP path is going to need much lower thresholds for jitter and latency than maybe your backups or updates. So you can have different health checks for different kinds of applications. And then if it's failed too many times, you consider it to be a failed health check, and you take that WAN interface out of the pool of available WAN interfaces, but you keep checking it until it comes back up. Maybe set a threshold for a number of recoveries that you need before you consider it healthy again. Additionally, you can even get more advanced to where you're doing like HTTP checks. It's a really user experience style check. You're not just looking, okay, can the packet get to its destination, but can I even get to that web page? We just had another BGP attack this week where Google was down for many internet service providers for nearly an hour because somebody in China made a mistake and they broadcasted Google's autonomous system number saying, hey, I have the best routes to here. And a lot of providers who weren't doing very thorough checking on those routes started sending their traffic that way. Some other providers, however, were actually vetting those routes, and they didn't go down. They could still get to Google properly. So if you have multiple different WAN internet service providers on your software-defined WAN appliance, you maybe want to be smart about how you check whether it's really down or not. Because if you're just looking at a ping check, the pings to somewhere in China might still be up, but it's not going to Google. You're not actually getting to the web page that you're expecting. And so you might say, okay, I got diverse carriers. Carrier A has this incorrect route to Google, and the page doesn't load. Whereas carrier B, their page does load, so I'm going to consider that connection healthy and send it out that one. All of these different technologies combined give you the best and most efficient use case for your bandwidth, so that you're taking the best possible performance and user experience for your WAN applications and translating that into higher uptimes and better user experiences for your environment. Another technology that is really important when considering WAN upgrades are ASICs, or application-specific integrated circuits. What an application-specific integrated circuit is it's very similar to the processor that's in your CPU, except the CPU that's in your computers and in your cell phones, their general purpose. They were designed to do just about anything, even though they can't do any one thing great. They can watch Netflix, they can play games, they can do spreadsheets, instant message, write software, all sorts of things that you can do with a general purpose chip. But because it's general purpose, there's trade-offs in efficiency, and it doesn't always use the most efficient means of achieving a given end for a given application. What an application-specific integrated circuit is designed for instead is to do one job and to do one job very, very well. It's fine-tuned to be the most efficient that it possibly can be at that job. And ASICs have been standard in switches and in routers for a very long time, over 10 years. But in firewalls, for various reasons, they're still not widely utilized. Most firewall vendors are still using CPUs, general purpose CPUs. And that has to do with some of the complexities that it comes with, next generation firewalls and being able to understand and detect different types of content within a packet. But we are seeing a shift now to where more and more vendors are starting to implement ASICs either to replace their CPUs or more commonly to augment their CPUs so that you can get that faster throughput on your firewall through the firewall to the internet in a more efficient manner. What happens a lot when somebody's upgrading their WAN circuit is they have a firewall that's rated for a certain amount of throughput. Maybe it's 300 megabits per second. They upgrade to a gig fiber connection. Now you have 700 megabits per second that is not usable to you. You're wasting money on that. You do a speed test and you think you got this gig fiber, and it's, where's my gig? I got the same speed I had before. Well, then you'd start looking at the spec sheets. Oh, this firewall is rated for 300 megabits per second. That's the best it can do. Well, now I have another capital expenditure cost that I wasn't planning on, and I have to upgrade. And you look at the price of a comparable firewall that can do a gig throughput, and it can often be 10, 20 times as expensive depending on how much more throughput you need. However, if you look at across different options available on the market, there are newer firewalls that are starting to implement ASIC chips that are much more efficient and on the order of 10 times as efficient, which gives you 10 times as much cost savings to get that faster throughput that you need for your increased WAN connection without having to rely on general purpose CPUs all the time. If you are in that case where you're looking at faster WAN connections and you're not getting the performance you need, take a look at what's really in the hardware, take a look at the spec sheets, and if you're looking around at possible upgrade options, if it's very expensive, there's a good chance it's not using ASICs yet, and you may be wanting to look around at alternative options that are starting to utilize ASICs. And finally, I just wanted to wrap up with a chance for anybody to ask any questions and see if you had any questions or comments for anything we talked about today.
With more and more applications independent or internet dependent, the importance of the ISP becomes more and more important. What have you seen with your customers as far as having a dual ISP solution?
Yeah, that is becoming more and more the norm because, like we were saying before, 1 hour of internet downtime for a cloud-focused business, or really any business these days, can be crippling to your productivity. And even the best internet service provider still has downtime sometimes. Oftentimes, the best solution is to implement WAN connections from different diverse carriers that are traveling over diverse paths, even best to travel over diverse mediums. If you get carrier A with their fiber connection, carrier A also has a cable connection available in your area, there's a good chance that a few hops up the line, both of those paths cross, and then you're on that same carrier, and if they're having problems up their way, then you're still going to go down anyways, and now your multiple connections weren't working out. So the best case is to have, if you can, more than one carrier on a circuit. However, oftentimes, if you're not implementing SD-WAN, you're not taking very good utilization of that second circuit. You've got one circuit often doing all the heavy lifting, the second one just sitting dormant and being a soft failover. You don't want that. You want that one to be doing part of the lifting, so you're taking the best advantage of your.
That would be the other thing is if you was using a 1 gig capacity before you get a second 1 gig, then it also the second one takes care of the workload.
Yes, definitely. And to where you're adding to the available pool and giving yourself redundancy at the same time. You're kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone. So that is becoming more and more common, and I highly recommend it for any business in today's world. If you're relying on the internet, I highly recommend a second internet connection. And oftentimes that can be something as simple as a 4G SIM card on a little wireless radio. Like, let's say it's a small branch office and you can't get fiber there, they already have cable. Well, what do you do now? Add a 4G SIM card, and maybe you have bandwidth limits on that. The SD-WAN appliances that we were talking about are smart enough to know, okay, I'm allowed 10 gigs per month. If I go over that, the overage charges for my providers start increasing like crazy. So what you say is, okay, certain traffic I want to send over there if it's low bandwidth, so I'm taking full advantage of that 4G circuit or connection, but only to a certain extent. Or maybe it sits dormant until you need it for failover. It really just kind of depends on the use case, but the software-defined appliances can give you that flexibility that you need to make the most out of whatever WAN technologies you have available in your area. Any other questions? I thank you all very much for coming to our talk. I wanted to share real quick before we get wrapped up. DataBytes is a new initiative DataYard is doing talks just kind of like today, where there's a whole bunch more that we could talk about, but time's limited and there's a lot of cool topics coming up. We wanted to be able to host people from the community and our partners and customers to invite them to a lunch and learn style event at DataYard. We have a couple of events on the schedule, and a couple of, we got the flyers over there. Feel free to take a flyer for the schedule and take a notebook with you as well. The two that we have on the schedule so far are Future Proof 2019, talking about what next generation firewalls mean for your business, the next level of security. Oftentimes, next generation firewalls and software-defined WAN go hand in hand. Like we were talking before about the, if you have malware going at your WAN connection, you want to drop it. But while you have malware, hey, maybe you should probably do something about it too. When you're already looking at the payload of your traffic and being aware of what content that application contains, that's the great time to do security as well as WAN optimization at the same time. So that's a great follow-up to this talk. That'll be in January on the 16th. And then Jurassic Park blunders. Using the Jurassic Park films as a springboard for a conversation about security and IT. And we're especially going to be focusing on a hot topic that's relevant to a lot of DoD contractors and even subcontractors now, which is NIST 800-171 compliance. But it also applies to, oftentimes, the security best practices apply to whatever industry or organization you're a part of. So come out and see us, and we'd love to have you. And finally, I just want to say we're hiring consultants and network engineers, movers, doers, and shakers. If any of the technologies that you saw today interest you, or you know somebody who would be interested in doing these kinds of cool and awesome things for our community in the Dayton area, put them in contact with us, hr@datyard.us. We'd love to start a conversation and see if we can make technology human for Dayton, Ohio.